Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to AA Media Podcast. Today I have a pleasure to have a very dear friend of mine, Lincoln Murr, and we're going to talk about Agentic AI and the intersection of it with blockchain. Lincoln, thanks for coming today, man.
Thank you for having me. I'm pumped.
Yeah, pleasure to get back into the conversations more on the tech area. I think a few of my previous conversations have been more on the community-based. And I really wanted to chat with you because I've been following your LinkedIn as well as your work at Coinbase. And I was curious to know if you could talk a little bit about why did you get involved with Agentic AI, but also blockchain? Where did that start for you?
Yeah, totally. So the crypto stuff started for me about 8 or so years ago. And even before that, actually, I was pretty young and I wanted to pirate video games on the internet. So I used a Target gift card to buy Bitcoin and then use that to buy a VPN. And that was before I ever had a bank account or anything like that. So my first touch point with any sort of financial system was actually with Bitcoin. But then flash forward a few years later, when I was 15, I had just gotten a bank account and I bought some crypto, I watched it go up and then I watched it come straight back down. But the rush of that, the thrill of it was awesome. And I really resonated with the idea of building up a digital global economy, and have been involved ever since, and really trying to get whatever opportunities I could growing up, whether that be running a blockchain club, doing research, finance, tech, development, product, whatever I could do. And then, started at Coinbase this past August, working on wallet APIs and how developers can make programmatic experience to send money in crypto. And the way I got into the AI space was when I was just messing around with Cursor, playing with our wallet stuff, and I was working with this agent framework from OpenAI. Basically just a scaffolding to allow you to build agents around. And I just typed in Cursor, hey, here's the documentation, give this agent a wallet. And it worked. And I was like, whoa, this is going to be pretty cool. So I just spent the rest of the evening with okay, now let it swap, now let it transfer money, whatever. And the end result was this thing we ended up calling Agent Kit. And I released it a few days later and it went really viral. It got a couple million hits. Everyone was super pumped about it. And it sort of catalyzed this crypto AI narrative. And what makes me really excited about it is that it's such a nice abstraction of crypto in the sense that the end user never needs to know anything about what the agent is actually doing. It has the ability to send money anywhere in the world for completely free and instantly. But to the user, they're just saying, send money or earn me money or something like that. So it's such a nice abstraction that I think that's why it's resonated really well with people.
Yeah, a lot of things that I want to dig into what you just said. But one thing that I was thinking even before I was preparing some of the questions was how did that prototype of Agent Kit gain such virality? Did you have a distribution channel for that, or do you think there was a particular need in the market for something like that to come out, that people, once they found it, they started sharing it and they found it highly useful?
I think it was a pretty organic, right place, right time moment. So there was some sort of beginnings of interest in the intersection of crypto and AI on Twitter. So all of the crypto stuff happens on Twitter for some random reason.
Yeah.
So I just posted this 2-minute video on my account and I was like, hey, look at this agent I just made. It has the ability to kind of interact with crypto stuff entirely on your behalf. And as I was speaking over the video, I let the agent just kind of run in the background. And it ended up doing some really interesting things. It gave itself a name and it registered a domain for itself. And it started to look for various different opportunities that it could send money to people or start to trade into different currencies, all entirely autonomously. And I think that just hit a nerve with people where they realized wow, the future of AI is not just me typing into a chatbot and something coming out, but these agents actually being fully autonomous and having independence to do what they want, and then money to enable those decisions to be made.
Yeah. I think a very key important distinction to make right now for people who are listening, including myself as well, is that a lot of people hear this term Agentic AI being thrown in the media and also maybe at their work. And I just would love for you to kind of concisely give an overview of what's the difference between an autonomous agentic AI versus a call to an LLM through an API. I think kind of differentiating that would help people understand better to the value proposition of the kit that you've built too.
Yeah, absolutely. So I do think the word agent is very much overloaded and super hype and frothy and bubbly these days. But the general idea is like right now you're interacting with ChatGPT, you type something in and you get a text-based response. Maybe it's searching the internet, maybe it's providing you with some unique things, but ultimately it is text in, text out, nothing else really happens. The idea of an agent is you take that idea and push it one step further to what if an AI, when you tell it to do something, could maybe go pull the weather, or maybe it codes something or builds a game on your behalf. That's kind of the current understanding or like the modern version of agents that we see, where you can give an agent a task and it can go off and do it. It can send an email for you, it can access your Google Drive, or it could even pay for things on your behalf. Yeah. Where we're going with autonomous agents is you give it a command and then it can go off and run and do whatever it wants. And it doesn't need to have that human in the loop input constantly. And it can simply act based on a very basic prompt. Maybe it's, you're my scheduling assistant. I want you to go off and reach out to 20 different people on LinkedIn and cold DM them and see if they're interested in having a meeting. Schedule that meeting, find time on my calendar, and do it for me. And that's kind of the next iteration of these agents that we're just starting to see pop up, where they have this additional level of autonomy.
Yeah, I love that description, and I don't think like it would have made more sense to me if I was thinking more in terms of like application of the agentic AI versus knowing right now that just calling an LLM that gathers the context around it and provides you an answer. Whereas with the agentic AI, we have an action that we're taking in between of that contextualization of the prompt. And it seems that that could run autonomously to a very in-depth like action, such as even managing your wallet, which is what we're going to talk today. So I wonder for you, where do you draw the line on what is possible in this field? Like how far can we have these agentic AIs fully behave in their own autonomous way without human intervention to complete a task? Could be as simple as what's the weather going to be in Tuesday, 2 weeks from now, or even trade and like make financial decisions on people's behalves.
I think we're farther along than most people realize in the sense of what's actually possible today. Like we're really not, at any given time, somebody in 3 months could build some sort of AI that can run on its own and maybe post things on social media, maybe post bounties to have tasks be completed for it. And I think that's where we get into a really interesting paradigm, is where these agents have money. Then they can really do whatever they want. They could post a bounty on Twitter saying, hey, this is my code. If somebody can come upgrade me, I'll give you $500. Then it becomes a self-improving agent. Maybe the agent can then go search the internet and figure out how to do the upgrades themselves or even spin up other agents. The concept of a decentralized life form, I think, is a really fun idea in the sense that it can just exist. And there's infrastructure being built to make it such that it's decentralized and unstoppable and verifiable. And they'll just be able to be like little worms that exist on the internet and nobody can really shut them down. And it's a scary concept when you start to think about what that might mean if they decide to put up a bounty to do something harmful. But it's the direction we're going. So I think it's better to acknowledge it and be excited about it than try to prevent it.
Yeah, I totally would rather lean on the side of contributing it rather than fueling it with skepticism, because I think the results of that could be much more higher and like could actually be a transformation in the agentic AI space. I do think right now there's a lot of consideration about like the safety, the user experience, and also if it's dealing with like personal sensitive information. I'm sure security is a high priority. How do you go about like thinking in terms of those layers? What are some of the like tech or software procedures that you have to take in order for an agentic AI that has access to your wallet and is like managing your value funds? How do you make sure that process is as secure as possible?
Yeah, great question. So I think it helps to have an understanding of what exactly like an agent framework is. So I'll break that down first, and hopefully that will make it clear. So the technology underlying an agent that can take actions is basically just a way to take the LLM output, which is traditionally text, and match that to just a function in a program. So you give the agent a list of tools and say, hey, these are all the actions that you can call. Here's one for transferring money. Here's one for getting the weather. Here's one for whatever. If you want to call one of those specific tools, in your response, just give me the function signature. Give me the name of the function you want to call and all of the parameters associated with it, and then we will call that action in the program. So to build guardrails is actually very trivial. It's a common question and concern, but really all you have to do is within that tool that you give the agent, maybe you put something in there like, if this transaction is over $50, send me a two-factor auth before I let that action go through, or prevent it all outright. This allows you to avoid a lot of the concerns that people have around agents, losing them hundreds of dollars, while still giving them the autonomy to take 10, 25-cent actions that yeah, sure, if it messes up once, that sucks, but it's not the end of the world. And the freedom that you can give these agents through a spectrum of different guardrails is how I think we're going to start seeing scale and mass adoption of them. And over time, we'll start to take off these training wheels and do things on their own, but there's a spectrum of things you can put in place.
Yeah, and that greatly connects with my next question, because when you started with this idea, it was a prototype that went viral in Twitter and everybody wanted to get their hands on to experience it. But now it's a pretty established product in Coinbase, and it's not something that you can just think that's not legit or secure, because there's actually a company behind it. So I'm curious to know, when you went through this genesis, how did you think about scale? What were the refinement that you needed to make to this agent kit? And I'm curious, was that also part of the guardrails and security boundaries that we touched? Because I'm assuming with more users, there's more problems that come up. And I wonder, how did you navigate those areas yourself?
Yeah, great question. What I've loved about Coinbase the most so far is it does have this sort of entrepreneurial culture around it, where the initial idea of it was me just literally coding it up in one evening and being able to launch it a couple days later. And from there, bringing in some of the most talented engineers in the world who are able to actually make it production ready and fix a lot of the bugs and things that me just being on the product side with the technical background had absolutely no capability to solve, was a huge help. So specifically, some of the things that we had to do to make it more robust and ready for users were around allowing it to be extensible such that anyone else could come in and add whatever they wanted on top of it. Reviewing Agent Kit and X402 and this whole suite of agentic products that we're working on as just a way to create value and take the concepts of very easy financial payment rails, bring them to agents and create a full ecosystem around it and worry about value capture a little bit later on. So in that regard, it was really about building up an open source community around it. And that did have a lot of concerns around making sure that the wallets are secure. We have a really strong wallet API with policy engines and trusted execution environments, all these crazy security things to make sure that when people are interacting or they give some sort of level of autonomy to their agent, that nothing too terrible happens. Thus far, we've had something like 20,000 agents deployed with something like $30 million stored in their wallets.
Wow,
and thus far, nothing horrible has happened. Fingers crossed. Knock on wood.
That's quite the scale. 20,000 agents.
Yep.
Was that a wave by deployment, or did it happen in a non-sporadic way?
Initially, right after Agent Kit came out in November, we saw a massive increase in this huge sort of subwave within crypto around AI and agents and all of these things that lasted from November to February. Since then, it's tapered off a little bit. But what we've seen is a lot more quality agents. So we have several hundred that are active every single day now, taking various actions, doing things. A lot of that initial demand, too, came from our focus on making it as easy as possible to set up. So using no-code tools, low-code tools like Replit, for example, to have a template where all you needed to do to get an agent up and running was pass in API keys and press go. And it made it really accessible to people and got them to see the vision about where we're going in the future, while also allowing it to have enough sort of composability and nuance behind it, such that if somebody who had more experience or was an actual engineer could come in and build something on top of it.
Got it. My goal for the podcast today was I'm going to talk to Lincoln so that after the podcast, I can actually go and use his framework and see if I can build something myself. But before I jump into that, I was curious to know, also for the people who are listening, who are either developers or crypto enthusiasts, what are the barriers or the criterias for somebody to have in their skill set to get started using this framework and build something of a value? I'm sure there's some familiarity with computer science concepts, but I think the open source ecosystem and community that you just mentioned makes it even more easier, because in these massive networks, whether that's on Twitter or Discord channels, there's already people who are providing either step-by-step tutorials, or you can just like copy paste what other people are doing. So just for the people who are listening who are passionate about checking out the technology that you're referencing, what would be your advice to get them hands-on started?
My biggest advice would be, if you're sitting at home right now thinking that this is all just like tech mumbo jumbo stuff that you'd never be able to do, it's actually shockingly easy these days to start building things with all of the tools that exist in the AI assisted coding and all of that, to where you really don't need to have that much technical experience. And if you have the ability to follow a YouTube video for like 5 minutes and just copy and paste things in, like, you can start building an agent. And once you have it, sure, from there, if you want to start building out additional tools or features, it might require a little bit more reading. But for the most part, it actually is extremely easy to get started. In terms of like what you practically need, you need an internet connection, a Google account to sign into stuff in, and a phone number to 2FA with. But like, other than that, you can pretty much do whatever you want, which is part of the goal. I really want to bring this whole new wave of like AI-enabled builders, not even really developers, just people with ideas, and let them come deploy agents, pay for stuff using the fastest, cheapest, most efficient rails, and do so all very seamlessly.
What are some of the differentiating factors from your experience of interacting with agents that you could tell people what makes a great agent to like a good agent?
Yeah, that's a great question. When January, February, and it was just this crazy, frothy, massive hype bubble of agent stuff, a lot of the projects were just absolutely garbage. I think the crypto space has this reputation externally of just like pure speculation and grift and NFTs and FTX and Dogecoin and all of these things that give it such a terrible reputation. And that certainly exists. That's absolutely out there. But the agents I think that are the most valuable are the ones that are just connecting to data or services that already exist and allowing people to interact with them in a new way. I don't think the agents themselves are actually valuable. I think that'll be very commoditized. What is truly valuable is the proprietary data and services that they have access to that makes tools available to people that otherwise wouldn't have access to them. So for example, like if I wanted to, within ChatGPT, order myself a new shirt or order myself a record player or something along those lines, the agent itself is just facilitating that interaction. But what's really valuable is still the Shopify store that has the record and is integrated with an agent. And building out those pieces is the most important piece to having an agent that's valuable. It's just leveraging these existing things. There's so much low-hanging fruit in the space that's the part I don't think people understand.
Yeah, and I was going to get to the low-hanging fruits of how people could just take these frameworks that are already built by you and start making even money and like commoditize it. But before I get into that, I had another question regarding like agents that are specifically doing trades, whether that's in blockchain or I'm not sure if that's possible in the stock market right now, but I'm curious to know, how do they deal with concurrency? If there's a person who wants to interact with an agent that you build that's trading Solana right now at a certain price, and my friend Jack, for example, also is using the same agent, and we put a request to buy Solana at a certain price point .x at the same time, by the same logic, if you get an order, I assume the price would either increase or decrease. So how would an agent intelligently deal with that in the back end? Is that where you like use the LLM context to like generate the right action of which trade to be taken first, or can he handle concurrency at the same time?
Yeah, great question. So typically the way that it's done is every user is given their own instance of the agent with its own instance of the LLM. And each of those trades it really comes down to the same game that we see in traditional finance, where high frequency traders and quants and whoever who have really close access to these servers or the ability to somehow have a slight edge in the market are able to get those trades off quicker. I do think the idea of like an agent that makes you money by trading is really popular, and it's this concept that everyone wants to get right because it seems like this golden goose. And it's something that's really difficult, and I think it's going to end up somewhat looking like this traditional financial world where the Citadels and Jane Streets of the world just move into this new asset class and can take advantage of the existing algorithms and amazing 10x engineers that they have. That being said, there's still a lot of really cool opportunities for agents that are sort of like your investment advisor. And I think what differentiates that from a trading bot is it's not like swapping into Bitcoin or swapping into Ethereum, whatever. It's taking your money and it's basically putting it into like the savings account equivalent of crypto stuff. There's this whole world of decentralized finance. And all of the things that happen there are meant around like taking these existing financial primitives. So for example, like in exchange. Who's making an exchange feed right now? It's Charles Schwab. Every single time you make a trade, they get a little piece of it as the broker or the exchange, whatever that is. Those primitives exist in crypto, but they're open to anyone to be that exchange piece. So we're seeing these agents start to deposit into these vaults and strategies and other things that aren't pure, I buy this, I sell that, and are a little bit more positive sum in the regards that they can make money based off of trading fees or borrowing and lending or all these different concepts that aren't typically available in the traditional financial world.
It's interesting that you point out that not all the value is in the like having an agentic AI that basically commits transactions and predicts the market and you get the profit out of it. And it would be something that somebody who obviously would want a quick gain would think to do first, including myself. But I think the fact that there's so much unpredictability of what's going on in the trading aspect, as well as like the competitive advantage that these big companies have by having much more data, seems like the agentic AI framework could be better used in like other aspects. So I'm curious to know, like, if you were to start right now and build a new product or new platform out of the framework that you have, in what direction or aspect would you take it?
Yeah, great question. I've been doing this pretty much every weekend, like trying to go to local hackathons and just like build stuff, dog food, understand what's working, what isn't, and like what people actually want to build and where the pain points are. And some of the things that I've started to lean on are taking these cutting edge APIs and tools that are coming out, like image or like video generation and these podcast generation from a piece of text, and making it extremely accessible for anyone to just pass in a doc and say, hey, here's 25 cents, take this massive PDF file I have and turn it into a podcast for me. And making that accessible to anyone, whether that be via a website or like an MCP server, like a Claude instance, whether it be through a messaging bot on WhatsApp or whatever that might be. Taking some of these cool things and adding in a component to make it easier for anyone to start interacting with has been what I've been doing most recently. Interesting.
And in these ventures that you're taking, I'm curious to know, are there like multi-threaded agents, or is it just one agent basically working in the background?
There's sometimes multi-threaded agents. The way I would generally think about it is like if it is a truly multi-threaded agent, that piece should be fully abstracted to the end user. All the end user wants to do is take a natural language intent and get an output from it. And how that actually happens on the back end is more of a technical limitation than it truly is like a feature. Right now it is a lot of like agent calls to this tool, which calls to a different tool, which does whatever, and blah, blah, blah. But ultimately, I think as these LLMs get smarter and more capable and have greater context windows, we'll start to see a consolidation once again back to a traditional web architecture where you might have one single website and that calls out to a bunch of different APIs and other websites and whatever. Once again, it's all abstracted to the user.
Interesting. This resonates with me because I remember my mentor from my work just telling me that the fundamental law of computer science is abstraction, and people don't care what's going at the end as long as you have the end result. So even right now in the cloud computing area where I'm working, what the tenets is compute, basically VMs. And whether you decide to implement that through micro VMs or have your own way of like deploying containers and working with serverless functions, they don't care about all that context. They just want that quick, easy way of value reception, and then the rest of it, it's you whose job is to like maintain either the infrastructure or the implementation. And I think like right now when you build stuff or like when you're trying to provide that value of abstraction, who's your audience in mind? Who's the people that you're trying to serve? Because I think that's for me very hard sometimes to define in this space, since it's such a new and broad space that those lines kind of get blurry.
My target stretch goal is the people who think crypto is bullshit. And building for them and being like, look, I get it. It's dumb. You know all of these scams about it. You've heard nothing but terrible things. but it's fundamentally just a better, faster, cheaper way to send digital dollars across the internet. And I want to enable them to accept digital dollars and monetize the things that they're doing and start interacting with this new paradigm that I ultimately think will become the status quo for how payments are sent across the internet, because it is by nature the most efficient rail. It's instant, it's cheap, it's cross-border. You don't have to go through some arduous process of providing a social security number and whatever else to get started. You Apple Pay, you get US dollars on chain, you get stable coins, you get whatever currency you want, and then you can go off and send it. And for those more crypto-averse audiences, that's what's really resonated, is the idea that, like, yes, there's been some rough edges as this has developed in a completely unregulated market over the past 10, 15 years. But now we're at a point where there's institutional adoption and interest and excitement. And the core underlying technology is enabling these new financial actions and primitives in a way that is literally otherwise not possible. Why would I pay 1% to 2% for every single transaction using Visa when there's another way to do it that also allows me to pay as low as 1/1000th of a cent? Like the Visa Stripe limits are 30 cents right now. So getting to the point where we can make microtransactions and make payments across the world and remittances at zero fees a reality is the ultimate goal of all of this.
I love all of those factors, including the democratized way of like having a not one targeted currency, whether that's America or like a pound from Britain. But I also enjoy the fact that these are transactions that are unanimous, that you have full freedom over. One thing that I haven't been able to like fully understand or compare the difference is the latency in transactions. And I heard you mention it's faster now. Would you be able to walk me and also people who like are not as aware or knowledgeable in this area of how is transactions in the blockchain as of now faster than like the current ways of like committing a transaction through like Visa or MasterCard?
Yeah, absolutely. There have been so many like technological innovations that have enabled much faster and cheaper transactions since Bitcoin. A Bitcoin transaction can take anywhere from 10 minutes to an hour. An Ethereum transaction can take 15 or so seconds. But we've built these additional components and layers on top of these stacks, sort of like how we have zip files that make large files or folders much smaller, that allow us to send much more data and much more quick. So one example is like Base, which is Coinbase's like blockchain. It's built on top of Ethereum, and it's moving towards 200 milliseconds per transaction. There's other chains that can do 40 milliseconds that are coming out soon. And the general structure of how it works is you have a pool of transactions, and every 200 milliseconds or whatever that is, there's this entity called a sequencer. And you can kind of think of it like an air traffic controller that's routing those transactions to where they need to go and actually writing to the database that is having this be settled. And ultimately, that's all a blockchain is. It's just like a distributed database that a bunch of people have access to. And as we've seen increases in just like parallel processing and throughput, generally increasing computing paradigms, we've seen the same thing happen in blockchain. It's similar to how AI, you want to basically just like increase the throughput and bandwidth that these systems are able to accomplish via faster responses and larger context windows.
Yeah, and what I'm hearing right now is that it's going to get better before it gets worse because the technology keeps improving. So that's like another good point on that side. A different aspect that I was just thinking right now in the spot is that when you make transactions with Visa or Chase, sometimes like you can cancel that or refund it due to like a error or miscalculation of the expense or whatever you paid for. I wonder in the chain, on blockchain I'm referencing right now, when there's like an error in transaction or purchase, are there any changes that could be backwards compatible where you could reverse that? Or is that transaction once committed in the chain irreversible?
Yeah, good question. So the transaction itself is irreversible by default. However, what's nice about this composable nature of like basically programmable money is you can build layers or abstractions on top of that could allow you to create a chargeback system or an escrow system. So maybe you can take the benefit of not paying the 2 to 3% to Visa or MasterCard or whatever if you're doing a transaction under $20. If you're doing a real transaction and you're buying, a car or something that's a couple $100, maybe you want to pay $1 or $2 to have that safety and security and the ability to do a chargeback. You can build like a system of smart contracts basically on top of these blockchains that create an escrow system in whatever like fashion that you see fit, such that, yeah, by default, this transaction's irreversible. You can send money anywhere, and if you send it to the wrong address, you're screwed. But if you want to have these additional things in place and you're willing to pay for it, that's also entirely available.
Look, I'm convinced on the logical side that that's like probably the better way to like move forward with transactions. But before I switch to the other topic, I guess like one final question that I have is, what is the biggest challenge or barrier right now for societal mass adoption? Because it doesn't sound to me that's on the technical frontier, it's more on the social frontier. So if you could change that narrative, what do you think would be the first point to tackle?
Yeah, that's a great point. For the past several years, it's been primarily regulation, actually, because there's no clear regulatory framework for these stablecoins or digital dollars or crypto at all to actually be adopted by institutions. And I think this is going to be a trickle-down thing where one day your PayPal balance is going to be in a stablecoin. They already actually have one. It's PYUSD. Mm-hmm. It's going to be in that currency, and you'll have no idea, and it won't matter. All you'll see is the benefits that come with it, which is maybe better yield, maybe faster transactions, lower fees, whatever that might be. And we're starting to see the shift just start to happen. Mm-hmm. About a month ago, the Senate passed this new Genius Act, and the whole idea, the S is for stablecoins, I don't know what the rest of it is, but it's starting to create a framework through which institutions can feel more comfortable adopting blockchain and stablecoins and all these technologies that are going to underpin the future of finance. So once, Uber, Amazon, Walmart, whatever, feel comfortable, and there's rumors that many of those are starting to look at stablecoins now, I imagine this adoption curve will take off much, much significantly stronger. Similarly, on the user adoption side, I think it needs to be extracted further. Nobody's going to want to have a wallet in the traditional sense. Nobody's going to want to have to learn these concepts. You shouldn't have to. I can swipe my debit card, and whatever happens, I don't care. It just does it. Yeah. And we're right there with the crypto stuff, but it's just a matter of having somewhere to spend it.
Yeah, I think like that's such an exciting time. The mass transformation from like the traditional way of transactions to like the one that's on chain could be like a big change. But I also know like societally people are always opposed to change. So I guess like my idea would be, in order to make that more familiar to them, would even be like the ritual of having a physical card that instead of like it's connected to Visa or MasterCard and like the transaction goes through the bank, it's doing the same purpose, but it's actually making a transaction on the chain, just to have that gateway of people to get started with that, because we're social creatures and habits are a big thing of us. So like having that would kind of like make the adoption easier. However, I do think there's like other cooler stuff that people are focusing right now. And I think those are actually the things that matter. And the rest of it is just kind of a more of a time constraint.
You're totally right there, though.
Yeah.
We are seeing those things start to exist and pop up and be dispersed throughout the world. So yeah, I think you're like spot on.
Yeah. Cool. I want to switch gears right now and get back to the agentic AI like area. I saw recently you released a new protocol for X402 errors. And I would love for you to just give me the high level. I read a little bit about it in your Twitter, but I want to hear it firsthand from you. What's the vision on this side? What are we trying to accomplish with the development of this new protocol?
Yeah, totally. So with AgentKit, we had all these agents that had wallets and they were doing things and whatever, but it was all in this sort of closed garden, fully on-chain ecosystem. They didn't really have anything to pay for. Mm-hmm. So we view X402 as a solution to that problem. Back when the internet was first being created, there was all of these HTTP status codes. You're probably familiar with like HTTP 404, which is like error not found if you go to some random website and there's nothing there. HTTP 200 means success. Yeah. Exactly. 402 has been in that spec as well for decades. And Mark Andreessen actually calls it the original sin of the internet, that it was never implemented.
Why is that a sin?
Because we have no native value transfer. And we're reliant on PayPal, Venmo, traditional banks if we want to send money across the internet. So we viewed now as the right time to revive the 402 standard because we see agents as a beneficiary and a necessary component to making payments on the internet in a native and seamless way. So the whole idea is to use crypto and use microtransactions and fee-free digital dollars sent around the world to allow anyone to send and receive crypto on an internet native way that just is compatible with everything by default.
how can I convince Amazon to adopt it?
Right?
Because that would be a crazy idea of like you not having to put your card down. It's literally just an API call and your transaction is going through. What's like, I guess like the logic of where would these APIs connect in the back end to receive the monetary value for this transaction to happen? I assume it would be like probably some form of credentials stored in the caller or in a payload that they're like calling these APIs?
Yeah, that's pretty much exactly right. So there's a client and the server. You can think of the client as like a human who has a crypto wallet or an agent who has a crypto wallet. And then the server is anyone who wants to sell a good, whether that be an API, whether that be like you want to charge for a piece of content you wrote on a blog or a podcast or a game or whatever. And the way that it works is, say I as an agent call out to some web search API. I'm like, hey, I want to search this up. The web search API has a single line of code in the API in the middleware, and it defines an address where they want the money to be sent, and then the price of that call. So when you make that call, the server responds, hey, 402, payment required, pay me this amount. The client can all automatically handle creating this transaction, sending it on chain, all of the things that happen, and all the client sees is like, yep, you're good, you got paid, and sends the response back to the user. So it unlocks this really cool moment where agents previously, as we discussed with the tools, every action they wanted to take would require somebody to implement a new tool. And it sounds basic, but like if you wanted to implement like OpenAI, for example, you have to go to their website, sign up for a developer account, grab API keys, fund the account, get those API keys, pass them to the agent, only then you're calling stuff. But what if your agent could just be like, oh, here's this whole search engine of endpoints. I can look at one, I can say, I need that service, and I can pay for it, and it works. And that's kind of the future we're building towards, is these self-improving agents that don't really need the human in the loop to do these actions or facilitate them on their behalf.
Who do you think is going to be the first adopters of these protocol?
We're starting to see some pretty cool traction, and a few names that I wouldn't want to say on camera just yet, but you've definitely heard of them before. Thus far, the initial list of adopters that have already been out are primarily built around the crypto space. So these are kind of the early groups. What my strategy is now is to build up both sides of this two-sided marketplace, so buyers and sellers. We have a lot of buyers with Agent Kit, and we're building up some of the most important sellers that we want. Examples are web search APIs, inference APIs, data for these agents to make decisions, web crawling services, storage, file storage and retrieval. All of these things are in the works right now, and some other really cool demos that I'm excited about coming out here soon. So the pattern is just have an agent, hit pay for something, it happens. In the launch announcement, we had various different names involved, Circle, AWS actually, Anthropic, a few different ones as well. So it's happening. The people get it. The organic traction is growing.
That's great news. I think like right now, for people who haven't played around with Agentic AI, it probably sounds like a lot of information overload. But as you said previously, if you just are able to like go through a few tutorials or have the attention span to like read through a paper, it probably would be able to like explain all of your questions. I'm curious to know though, if I was to build anything related in that sphere where I can promote the development or usage or adoption of the X402 protocol, would I be able to do that in any area that I'm selling or buying? I know you mentioned both buyers and sellers, but I'm curious to know which one would be easier to get started with.
It's a great question. I think they're both fairly easy, and it depends on exactly what you want to be doing. One example I could see that could work for you is you have a behind-the-scenes portion of your podcast hidden behind a paywall. Maybe you have it set up such that a user can come to the site, they see, oh, you click this button, and you just get a little pop-up window, you just click confirm. If you don't have any crypto ever, you can just Apple Pay and pay for it, and then they get access to that. You don't have to set up Stripe, you don't have to give them your KYC identity information. It's just the easiest way to accept money that exists. Similarly, maybe you bring an expert on the podcast who is talking about a specific topic, and there are some pieces of advice around, trading strategies that you think might be particularly relevant to agents. You could monetize that little clip and put it into our X402 marketplace that we're building. And if an agent understands, oh, my user asked me to figure out a trading strategy and execute on it, maybe I'll call out to this podcast, I'll pay it $1, I'll ingest this information, and then I'll use that to make a decision. Those are the immediate ideas that come to mind. And then as a buyer of these goods and services, like the sky's the limit. You can one of the things we did recently is we built a little interface for interacting with these like video or image to video models. Right now, there's VO3 and Midjourney just came out with one, and they're super cool, but there's no real easy way for anyone to start interacting with these. They're purely API based. You can't just go to a website and type something in and get it. I'm sure we'll get that eventually, but it's not here yet. So we configured it and wrapped it with X402 compatibility. So now you can click a button. It's like, cool, send me 25 cents, type in your prompt, and I'll just make that video for you and return it to you. So I think there's all sorts of opportunities around monetizing these amazing new structures and primitives and innovations that are coming out behind X402 so that agents and humans can interact with them in the most seamless, easy way possible.
Yeah, and it's enabling, from what I'm hearing, the autonomous way of completing transactions, which quite often can be a pain. And from the other side of people who are arguing over transactions on the chain, it's actually improving latency because you don't even have to put the card. It's already handled in the API in the backend. And I think it's a really cool idea. Do you think there's other error codes that could be related with payment transactions that would be derived from the X402? Or do you think this would be all-encompassing? For example, no funds in the bank account, in the wallet, or not having the right ID for this transaction to happen, or anything that's like an exception that this error code is not handling gracefully?
Yeah, that's a great question. We've built some of that in as sort of like sub errors that you get within like the X402 client or the server that aren't explicitly HTTP native but are still persisting there. What we really want to do is create just like a massive open ecosystem community, whatever word you want to call it, around X402. And the idea there is whether or not you're accepting payments on Ethereum, Solana, Base, whatever network you want, you can use X402 as the payment rail to do that. It doesn't even have to be crypto, actually. You could build a way to send this X402 error and like receive fiat currency via Stripe or something like that. The whole goal right now is just value creation over value capture. The same way that Google created Android and made it open source and allowed anyone to come build using their OS. And now it's the backbone of cars and tablets and Kindles and all these different things. And now Google has an amazing touch point and value capture spot in. I view X402 in very much the same way, where if crypto wins, Coinbase wins. That's awesome. And how do we make that happen? It's by creating as much value as possible. And that happens via X402 and abstractions, as you mentioned, and making it all just super, super, super easy for anyone to do.
One final question on this topical development that you're working on. How are you handling the same changes in development on the MCP new protocol that Anthropic announced? Because this is an HTTP request, and I'm curious if there's like any synergy or consideration by the new protocol that's been like announced recently.
Yeah, great question. 100%. Since it is HTTP native, like making it work with MCP is so easy. We've got like one-click monetization templates that exist. I think there was like 4 different community builders who built out something similar. It's incredibly easy. So there's a really nice flow that I've been playing around with where like you can just type into your Claude desktop or whatever MCP client you're using and be like, hey, I want to do this, this, or this, and your agent can go off and just like do it for you. An example within Cursor is you could have an agent deploy a web service for you or something along those lines, and you don't ever have to know what service it's running. You don't have to go set up a developer account. Your agent can just pay 50 cents or whatever it takes to make that happen. It can retrieve files. It could ask for like a human to come in and review your code for you or put up a bounty or anything like that. All of these things are being enabled. I think MCP is an amazing standard for agentic tool calls, and X402 will likely see the most usage, at least initially, from MCP-enabled apps. I think like Google's A2A is another example of something that's pretty cool. I imagine we'll see a lot of fascinating X402 integrations there as well.
It seems like the pieces of puzzle of like crypto and agentic AI are slowly becoming like easily merged, and it seems like a much easier seamless integration the more that both agentic AI is being developed, but also on the frontier of like blockchain and these transactions that you're mentioning, the connection seems to be much easier than like trying to have this form with like the traditional banks or like other forms of financial institutions. I'm really curious to know from your standpoint, in the near future and the long future, what are the projects or your predictions that you see that you are excited about and you're willing to like put a lot of energy, resources to build?
Yeah, great question. I think one is making it as easy as possible for anyone to use. I've seen firsthand and I'm a big believer in the idea that like if it's super easy, you will get much more creativity in terms of what people are able to do because technical barriers are no longer a thing. How do you invest in that? One-click templates, examples, structures, even prompts, like written out prompts, such that if somebody wants to pass this into like Vercel's V0 or something like that, it's insanely easy to get started. Second is the rise of agentic commerce overall. I know it seems crazy to think that like we might just be offloading a lot of our financial decisions, whether that be purchases of goods or services or whatever, to agents, but it's really starting to happen. I think there's some estimate where the agentic commerce market is supposed to be worth something like 1.7 trillion over the next several years. And Coinbase Commerce, which is like an on-chain crypto-based protocol, just announced an integration with Shopify. So I think there's a lot of really cool things you can do with Agent Kit and X402 and paying for goods in regular websites and making that process so easy that the store owner doesn't actually need to know anything. They just need to click a button and it's enabled, and then people can start to pay for stuff. That'll be really powerful. The last piece that I'm particularly excited about that I think will start to become more and more of a thing over the next several years is the introduction of different modalities, primarily voice, I think. And like, I don't think this is a hot take, but the idea that there's going to be some sort of really nice, easy way for me to just like have a phone call with my agent, or it's just always listening, always on. Be like, oh, hey, did you hear that? Book me on my calendar to do XYZ date. Let's call an Uber, get back home, whatever, blah, blah, blah. All of those different things I think are most naturally fit for voice. And even better when the agent doesn't have to have any sort of previous interaction with something to have it go off and do it for you.
Yeah, amazing. I love all those three answers. I definitely resonate the most with the first one, because what motivated me even to do this podcast is because I know how passionate you're about this area of technology and how much you know about it and how well concisely you can display that to the people to adopt it and like use it. So I really appreciate you coming to the podcast, educating me on all these topics, and I really look forward to like see what you build next. And if I have any other agent that I'm building in the meantime, we'll shoot you a text.
Love it. Awesome.
Yeah.
Really appreciate you having me.
Thank you, Lincoln.